Good morning. Today we are going to be continuing our lesson on fractions, but we're going to focus today on finding a common denominator for fractions that have unlike denominators. So by the end of today's lesson, hopefully you'll be able to find that common denominator when you're given two unlike denominators in a fraction. So for example, when you're used to, you learned last year that when you're adding a fraction, you have like 1/4 plus 1/4. Our denominator is this bottom button right, or the bottom number right here. And when you're adding fractions, that bottom number will always stay the same. The denominator does not change. The only thing that we actually add is the top number. So in this case, we have 1 plus 1 equals 2. So we have 2/4. 2 is our numerator, 4 is our denominator. The denominator does not change when you're adding or subtracting. But what if you decide to start a running journal or a walking journal, and you decide, okay, well, on the first day I walked 1/3 of a mile. The second day I walked a half a mile, and the third day I walked 3/4 of a mile. Well, if we want to add this together, our denominators are different. So we cannot add them until we can make sure that the denominator is all the same. And we can visually see this by, I took a piece of paper and I cut it in half. I ripped it in half. So I have two equal pieces of paper here. And on one piece of paper, I'm going to, here, let's move this. On one piece of paper, I'm going to fold it right in half. Now we saw before, and you can see, I'll show you again, that these pieces of paper are the same size. They're equal, right? But how many sides do we have over here? On this piece of paper, we have 2 parts. All right? So let's take our other piece of paper here, and we're going to fold it once, and then I'm going to fold it one more time. So remember, we started off with 2 pieces of paper that are exactly the same size. This piece of paper we folded once, we have 2 parts. This piece of paper here we folded twice, and so now we're going to get 4 equal parts. So while these two images, or sorry, these 2 pieces of paper rather, are the same size, they have different parts in here. So whether that's like a pizza that you're cutting into maybe 4 slices of pizza versus 2 slices of pizza, or it's a snack that you want to share with 4 friends versus only 2 people are sharing it. It's important to be able to see that we don't always have the same number of parts when we're dealing with fractions. So if I wanted to add, in this case, let's say I was adding this part here, just this part, that would be considered 1/2 of this total. The bottom number there is how many total pieces do we have. In this case, we have 1, 2 total pieces. The top part is the part. We're only talking about one piece right here, so that is your 1. So this represents 1/2 of the whole. Over here, let's say we want to do three of the parts. So again, the denominator, the bottom number, is the whole. How many total pieces do we have? We have 1, 2, 3, 4. And then how many pieces are we shading in? 1, 2, 3. We're shading in 3. That's our part. That's a numerator that goes on the top. So if we wanted to add this together, so maybe it was 2 different pieces or 2 different pizzas. This is pizza 1. This is pizza 2. If we wanted to add, let's go back to over here. If we wanted to add, well, 1/2 plus 3/4, how would we do that? And that's what we're going to focus on today. So let's just jump right into it. One of the ways that we can find a common denominator is using a multiplication chart. A multiplication chart is a quick way to kind of show us so visually where we can find a common denominator. So I'm actually going to get a different colored pen here. And I want us to remember that we're looking for 2 and a 4. That's our common, the numbers we're looking for a common denominator. So using our multiplication chart, I always start with the small number because it's on top, and I'm going to follow along with the bottom number here. And I'll show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to look for multiples of 2 to see where we have a common denominator. So if I start with 2, is there a 2 down here in 4, or common denominator? There is not. So move over to here. 4. 2 goes into 4. Well, 4 also goes into 4, so that is our common denominator. So that means we can keep, or we're going to change it to 4 being our common denominator. In this fraction, 3/4, because 4 is already in there, do we need to change the numerator or the top number? We do not, so we're going to keep that there. What about over here? We do need to change it because we have a 2 as a denominator here. So how are we going to do that? Well, let's go back to our multiplication chart. So if I go over to here, we say, okay, well, how many times does 2 go into 4? 2 goes into 4 2 times. So that means 2 times 2 equals 4. And whatever we do to the bottom, we have to do to the top of a fraction. So if we multiplied by 2 on the bottom, we're going to have to multiply by 2 on the top. So if we're going to kind of write this out, 1 over 2 times 2 equals 4. Do the same thing on the top. 1 times 2 equals 2, 2/4. So now we have our new fraction, 2/4 plus 3/4. And we can just add along. Now, today we're not going to focus on the adding or the subtracting. We're really just going to focus on finding the denominator and finding the equivalent fraction to go there. So let's find, I'm going to pick a couple more numbers here that we can use to find a common denominator. And we'll give you a moment to find a common denominator with a couple of your examples. So for example, let's say we have 5/6 and 4/5. How would we find the common denominator? Again, we're only looking at the bottom number, the 6 and the 5. So let's go back up to our multiplication chart here. So starting with the top number, and we say, okay, well, does 5 go into 6? Nope. Does 10 go into 6? Or rather, I should say, does 6 go into 10 evenly? No. Does 6 go into 15 evenly? Does not. Keep on going. We got 20, we got 25, oh, we got 30. 30. So in this case, 6 and 5, the first common denominator that they share is 30. So we're going to change 5/6 into 30 with a denominator, and 4/5, we're going to have the 30 as a denominator over there. Okay? So I'm going to actually skip ahead for 1 second. Let's focus on trying to find one more common denominator. And then we'll go back up and we'll find the equivalent fractions. So let's say you have another denominator with 4/8, and we'll do 3/3. So looking at 3 and 8 is our denominator. So starting with our smaller number, we're going to look here and say, okay, can 8 go into 3 evenly? No. How about 6? No. 9, 12, still over here. 15, nope. 18, 21, 24. 24 is going to be our new common denominator for both of those. So 4/8 is going to go into 24. 3/3 going to 24. So that's how we find our common denominator. So I'm going to give you a couple of numbers here that I want you to find a common denominator as well. You don't need to find the equivalent fraction yet. We'll go back and we'll do that in a minute. But just find the common denominator between 1/3 and, let's say, 4/7. And we'll do 1/6 and 4/3. So what is a common denominator between 1/3 and 4/7 and 1/6 and 4/3? Go ahead, find those numbers out and go ahead and type it into the chat when you are ready. When recording this video, I would have done things a little bit different had students been online with me. One of the things that I would have been able to do is to pause a couple times there to get student feedback and involvement. For example, when asking students about where they would see unlike denominators in our world, maybe ask the students, give some more examples from them, see what they would know. And also too, when I showed examples of how to find a common denominator, I would take a moment to have the students find those on their own, a couple examples to double check to see where they're going. Another way that I could gauge the, to have multiple modalities or different ways to have students be able to find these answers visually, especially in the beginning when I showed the pieces of paper folding. I tried to do that as a way for the visual learners as well, the students who need kind of those concrete examples. Fraction strips would have worked as well, or any other type of manipulatives that would express that. I would make sure that during the lesson, those checks for understandings would be built in so that I could pause and see where they need help, and have a list of other resources, whether it's other videos that students can kind of look back on their own after the lesson is over to see how maybe other teachers are doing it or other methods as well, and be able to share that information based on the student's strengths if needed. When it comes to making sure that I get individualized student information, I assume that there's either chatting, either using chat boxes or whatever the method is that communication is between the teacher and student. The most important thing is that you get it as quickly as possible. So asking students to answer that question right then and there. And if I need to set up other times to be able to meet with those students or a small group of students, if able to, definitely would help to add further understanding to what they may have missed. And giving feedback in the moment, that being able to say, here's a couple examples, but how do you get those answers, and having them answer right there in that moment would be able to give that quick formative assessment to gauge understanding. But even utilizing like quizzes.com or Kahoots, or doing other quick little things that maybe you can integrate to give a quick formative assessment, maybe 5 or 6 problems to see how they do.